and welcome. Stage 6 of Tour of Hainan. We're heading down towards Sanya. It's tourism time, but not for Jakub Mareczko. He's the man of the moment. 4 stage wins in succession in what has been a dominant performance for the Willier Tristina squad in the sprints. 4 stage wins and a second place, the only blemish from the first day. It's all going well for Mareczko. Not going too badly either for the Bardiani CSF squad. They've got further fish to fry tomorrow. They'll look towards the GC, and Vitaly Butz, he's looking good, looking confident in that polka dot jersey as leader of the mountains competition. Have a look at the GC as well in tomorrow's Queen stage. The Swiss squad came to race, and certainly they did that yesterday. It was emphatic and fascinating stuff. Well, here's what we've got for you. A little spin out to the coast and then hug the coastline all the way down to the southern part of the island, to the most popular tourism destination in Hainan, which of course is a very popular tourism destination for everyone in Asia and beyond, particularly for those from China. And here you have the 2-man breakaway. It was 3, but it's been pared down to these 2 intrepid souls that are pushing on for glory, controlling a gap of just on 4 minutes. It's never been more than 4 minutes and 20 seconds. It's rarely been less than 4 minutes since the 3 riders forged clear in the very opening moments of the stage. We're getting some images of this popular part of the world for tourism. It's beautiful blue oceans and sandy beaches, and it's really just the perfect place to come for a bit of a spin, a bit of a promenade down the coastline and a dip after that, and that'll certainly be on the agenda for some of the riders. Yesterday's 5th stage was quite simply savage. It was raced at an average speed of well over 46 kilometers per hour. The average speed for the bike race so far through the first 5 days and over 880 kilometers of racing is over 45 kilometers an hour. So they're going along at a fair clip, to say the least. Today has been a little more benign, conforming to the usual patterns, you might say, with the early breakaway becoming established early on, as opposed to yesterday, where the early breakaway took about 140 kilometers before it disappeared up the road, and even then only managed to get clear within the by what, 50 seconds, and maybe a little bit more than that, the maximum advantage for the break today. Completely different. And today's stage, for all that it's conforming to those to the usual pattern, it has been raced at a decent pace, and the Willier Tristina squad, as ever, they've been asked by the rest of the bunch to do the work. They've taken on the role with gusto, and you can tell that there's great motivation in that squad, courtesy of those 4 stage wins that they've had in succession so far. Jakub Mareczko, not just the winner of the stage yesterday as he was in the 3 previous days, but he is of course the overall leader of the race. The yellow jersey with a 24-second lead over Martin Lass, whose second place finish, his second successive second place finish for Delco Marseille Provence yesterday, leaves him handily placed at just 24 seconds back, the bonus seconds deciding it at the moment. Aberysturi, who took stage 1, sits in 31 seconds back in 3rd overall. Vitaly Butz, who's been up the road hunting for King of the Mountains points, has picked up some bonus seconds, sits in 4th position. Dylan Page, Ben Hill, Kulik, Zanotti, Maestri and Kononenko, the riders that are peppering the top 10, and needless to say they tend to be fast finishers in amongst those. But interesting to note that Kononenko, who's sitting 10th overall, was in the break today, has dropped out of it. He took the first, indeed all 3 bonus sprints along the way, and it hoovered up a handy 9 seconds. As we have a little look at the man who's wearing the leader of the points classification jersey, that's Martin Lass, sits 2nd in that classification, 69 points against the 79 to Jakub Mareczko. No surprise that Mareczko's leader of the points classification. He can only wear 1 jersey though. Butz, as we've mentioned, is leader of the King of the Mountains. Bardiani CSF, leader of the teams, and Liu Jiangpeng is the Asian rider. He's in the blue jersey. Try and pick him out for the Hengchang squad. That's the situation on the road. 4 minutes and 14 seconds for our 2 riders clear of the field. Alexis Cartier from H&R Block on the front here, and just sitting in his wake and sharing the pace as he has done throughout this stage. Joris Blucher, the 24-year-old Dutchman for the Monkeytown Continental squad. 2 riders up the road, 4 1/4 minutes advantage. Magnus Backstedt has been watching this stage with interest and keeping tabs on what's been a stage that conforms to the usual patterns, as I've said already, but it's another tough day in the saddle, second longest stage of the week.
It certainly is a long day today, 220 kilometers of racing, and I think certainly the 2 boys out front will be feeling today. They, as I said, attacked very, very early on, kilometer 0, and basically as the gun was fired, they clip off their front, and have since then been having to work pretty hard. And it's difficult to sort of realize how hard it is when you're riding at 45 kilometers an hour to maintain that speed out front on only 2 or 3 riders. As you said, Kononenko being in there for the first, should we call it, half of the stage until the intermediate sprints were all mopped up. So he's picked up a fair few bonus seconds, and you know, that's certainly doing his overall classification a bit of good.
Yeah, he's been 6th in this race before. It's back in 2013, but Kononenko might just be having a little look at the overall. As things currently stand, he will move up to 4th overall heading into tomorrow's Queen stage. He didn't stay out there all day, because going in the break the day before the Queen stage, well, he's going to use up energy he could usefully use for the climbs tomorrow, but it's he's given himself a bit of a racer's chance.
Yeah, well, it all comes down to seconds at the end of the day, and if you got an opportunity to head out into a breakaway, it's not going to cost you too much energy, then you know, why not get out there and mop up a few intermediate sprints and sort of move up on the general classification. So as we're going into tomorrow's Queen stage, I think Kononenko's done a good job there, and very smart as well to drop out of the breakaway back into the bunch to get a bit more rest and a bit more shelter, and have his teammates around him as well. So I think that's been an intelligent ride by Kononenko, and the 2 guys out front here now, obviously all of a sudden it's just a 2-up time trial, and I think they're certainly going to be feeling this towards the back end of the stage.
Yeah, Mikhailo Kononenko, we'll see if we can pick him out in the middle of the bunch, presumably safely in there, still safely in the 38-year-old Ukrainian, the most experienced Tour of Hainan rider in this year's current peloton. He's competed in this event on 6 separate occasions. He knows exactly how to manage this. He won Tour of Qinghai Lake back in 2014. So Kononenko is a man to watch out for in tomorrow's Queen stage. We're focusing now though on stage 6. We're coming down into the closing stage. It's just over 56 kilometers remaining. Time to get a commercial break out of the way. Back to you after these. Joris Blucher is pushing on and blocking the win nicely indeed for Alexis Cartier, the 26-year-old Canadian with the H&R Block squad. Those 2 riders remaining from the 3-rider breakaway that forged clear in the very earliest stages, the very beginning of this 219.6 kilometer 6th stage of the Tour of Hainan. The big bunch behind, not quite as big as it was when they set off back on Saturday morning for the first of 9 stages of this 12th edition of the event. It's Pujol at the back. We saw him in his giving it a bit of a punch yesterday in the break. Very distinctive features. He'll look forward to, I think, to tomorrow's Queen stage with interest. Oscar Pujol trying to just save as much energy at the back and stay as cool as possible. Very humid conditions, fairly balmy really. It's mid-20s Celsius, but a little bit of extra humidity means the riders are getting in the bottles, and he's very animated on the bike. Loads of gurning and facial changes that are keeping us amused, and he certainly is a bit of a character, isn't he, Oscar Pujol? Great effort to try and take the stage victory yesterday. The breakaway group just caught within 300 meters of the line. It was a tough day out for the Willier Trestina squad, because naturally enough it was put up to them. They're winning the stages for fun, you might say, at the over the last few days, so the other teams are not going to make it easy for them, but they did what they needed to do and managed to close it down, and still had the energy to try and put into perfect position Jakub Mareczko, Ugart Juba, presenting him into perfect position inside the last couple of 100 meters. And Mareczko had to go for a long one again. Paid off handsomely. A couple of sprints in the last couple of days. He was going from well outside 200 meters, getting on the pedals early, and it certainly looks as if Jakub Mareczko is enjoying his bike racing at the moment. 12 wins for the season. He is within a couple of wins of being the most successful bike racer in terms of victories, most successful professional cyclist of 2017, albeit the victories that he's taking are not of quite the same caliber of the wins that Fernando Gaviria and Marcel Kittel have taken to this point, but nonetheless he would welcome that status if it comes to him.
Yeah, no doubt he would welcome that. I mean, it's obviously all relative, I guess, in a certain way. Whether you win World Tour races or whether you win some of the smaller races, it's always difficult to cross the line first in a bike race, and no sort of, regardless of what level you're at, it's always difficult to win. So I guess we shouldn't take anything away from Mareczko and the number of times that he's crossed the line first this year.
No, it's not going to. I mean, if he goes level with Gaviria and Kittel, the world is not suddenly going to think that Jakub Mareczko is on a par with those two quick-step riders in terms of his ability. But they are going to sort of sit up and take notice of him a little bit more, and it might just be another stage in his development as a sprinter.
Yeah, and probably more so confidence as well for Mareczko, but the sprints are done so differently in these bike races compared to the races that we see in Europe, and certainly if we're taking a couple of steps up in terms of level of competition as well, they're a lot harder fought. It's a lot tighter. You end up taking more risks than you potentially are certainly in this part of the world, where at the moment Chupa, his teammate, is capable of dragging him into the right position when he needs to be. Whereas in a World Tour race, unless you got 4 or 5 guys preparing to commit 100% to dragging Mareczko into the right position, you're not going to get there, and all of a sudden it becomes a completely different bike race.
So it's just the strength and depth of the caliber of the sprinter he's up against. It's just that you need more riders.
And not just the sprinter, it's the teams that are committing a number of riders to that sprinter as well. So more often than not, you've seen 4, 5, 6, 7 teams coming up and challenging for sort of position within the peloton in the final 2 kilometers, and that's the difficult bit, to number one, have the confidence in your team that they're able to drag you to the right point at the right time, but then also certainly a lot more wrestling going on the bikes at that level than there potentially are here now.
Bit of wrestling going on for Joris Blucher, and behind him in the green and black colours of H&R Block, this is Alexis Cartier, first year on the team, second on a stage of Tour of Alberta in 2016, the standout result for the 26-year-old who's still a couple of years at continental level. So you might say coming into the Conti level a little bit later, but showing plenty of strength. Not his first day in the break either. He showed plenty of ambition yesterday, and indeed on several of the days. So Alexis Cartier is out to make a name for himself. He's certainly doing that at the moment. Inside 50 kilometers to go, 3 minutes and 53 seconds. So the gap is coming down almost imperceptibly, but the William Trestina squad is well tuned now. They know exactly what they need to do. They will be enjoying, I think, the work. It's tough work for them, but they'll certainly be enjoying it, given the returns they've already earned and won so far. Not just this week, but over the last few weeks in Asian racing. It really has been a productive visit for the Italian Pro Continental team.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting. The guys that are sitting here doing all the riding on the front now, they're almost starting their winter training at this race, if that makes sense, and more so from just building up kilometers of riding hard on the front of the bike race. it's actually quite a nice thing to do at this time of the year, is just to get that block of just riding really hard miles in the wind, and just at a constant pace as well. So when they finish off their season, and I do believe that this is the last race that they're doing, you can go back and have a couple of weeks basically completely off your bike, and you start training almost better than what you finished off the season at. And it's such a nice feeling when you get back on the bike and you actually feel really quite good when you start your winter training. So it's sort of, yeah, build up a good base to stand on. And I know I did a number of years where I did the Vuelta as my last race of the year, and then had basically 3 weeks off the bike, and then started training again for the following season to get ready for the classics. And you know, it takes about a week and a half for your body to fully recover from the Vuelta and actually start reaping the benefits. So when I got back on the bike, most of the time, the first couple of rides you're doing a little bit stiff, and then about a week into it, you're pushing out PBs on you know, a lot of your efforts that you're doing, and it kind of sets you up nicely then for the winter training to push on and improves going into the next season.
There really is almost no break compared to the old days. I mean, we think back to Bernardino going shooting and hunting and fishing, you know, for like 2 or 3 months. Literally would take months off the bike, and then they'd come back to it quite a bit heavier. And the received understanding, the received wisdom was you needed to put on the weight in order to, you know, not end up sick at the middle of the year. But there's a completely different view these days.
Well, a lot of the riders are traveling around the world, and you know, they go to warmer climates for winter training and so on. But it's one of those things that I am a little bit wary of, the fact that we are racing now into November, and by the time these guys finish off here, we're going to be, you know, the first week of November is gone. And then they're going to need to take a couple of weeks off to basically let their body recover from the season, and usually that takes almost 3 weeks for your body to kind of get to that state where it's completely 100%. So the fact that we're starting to race then at the back end of January, there isn't really that time to settle down and just start training, putting in some base miles and so on and so on. It's almost like you're kind of just trying to hold a bit of condition going into the following year.
Yeah, that always lasts for very long. Well, these riders are lasting for a long time out front, aren't they? Inside 50k to go, 3:47 to the 2 up front. Barniani CSF squad taking up position behind the preeminent Willia Trestina squad. The 2 Italian Pro Continental teams on the front of the peloton and chasing down these 2 riders, your 2 leaders up front, with 3 minutes and 40 seconds advantage. So they're losing second maybe every kilometre, maybe a little bit less than that at the moment. That rate of capture will ramp up as they get closer to the line. At the moment, they still believe that they've got a racer's chance. They're inside 45 kilometres remaining for Alexis Cartier and this man Joris Blucher, the 24-year-old Dutchman. For the Monkey Town Continental team, there's still much to believe. First year on the team for Blucher, ex-Park Hotel Valkenburg Continental team. He's with them for a few years. Took a nice stage win in the Olympia's 3M Tour in 2015. He's now out in Asia, plying his trade, and sitting handily placed, 47 seconds back. So he's still in a large group of riders that have been in the bunch each day and have placed themselves handily. Still theoretically on for a decent overall result, but going in the break today suggests that he doesn't have huge expectations ahead of tomorrow's Queen Stage. There are lots of riders in here today, though, that after what's been really tough racing over the first few days, they're hiding in there, trying to save as much energy as possible, and trying to get the food in, make sure that they're well watered as well ahead of tomorrow's big push for glory, because that is going to be a significant change in character to the racing that we've seen so far. There are no classified climbs whatsoever on today's 219.6 kilometre parcours. 3 intermediate sprints, that was about it in terms of diversion from the from the route in terms of what they're providing for us. But the bunch lined out along here, well, they're going along at a fair old clip, but as I say, as many riders as possible trying to save some energy. And Liu Changpeng from the Hainan squad has the pleasure and the honor of wearing the blue jersey of leader of the Asian rider classification. And for Changpeng, that's a significant honor. 44 seconds back, he's handily placed overall. Guangtong Ma, his teammate, who'd had that leader's jersey in the Asian rider classification for a couple of days at the beginning of the race, he was unfortunately forced to retire yesterday. He was retired 6. Now he's one of 4 non-finishers yesterday. 1 disqualification. Indeed, it was a fairly controversial one. Anthony Jacobo, the Isoway Sports Swiss Wellness rider, who's an accomplished sprinter. A couple of top 10 performances already in the race, and Jacobo was one of the riders came down with Freeberg, his teammate. And Jacobo just spent too long on the back bumper of the car trying to make his way back onto the peloton, and the commissars took a dim view of it. Not all commissars would be as vigilant, perhaps. I mean, it is the rule, you're not supposed to take pace from your team car, but sometimes the commissars are satisfied that as long as they're not getting a sticky bottle, i.e. they're not being pulled or sort of pushed along in any way, that if they can take shelter behind the car, then they're still forced to make a significant effort. Physically, they're burning matches to try and get back into the peloton, and they have been severely inconvenienced by a crash or some sort of mechanical difficulty.
Interesting.
Just as I was talking about that, it's the Swiss riders want to go on the attack again. 2nd day in a row they've come to race. This is a Swiss national lineup, and Lucas Spengler right at the front of that group.
Well, clearly there's a bit of crosswind coming in from the sea here now, and the Swiss team are feeling that they want to have a go at this, but I don't think it's quite enough wind coming from the side. It's not stringing out the bunch an awful lot straight away.
Well, this is clearly a planned move. They have worked their way to the front. They're rotating from the left, and this squad, it's not a well-oiled machine, of course, because they don't normally race together, but they've come here with intention to try and put something up. This is going to close up the gap to the 2 riders in front. But what are Bardiani and more particularly William Trestina going to think about this? 60 kilometers an hour, they're charging along. Their riders at the back of the group going to be a little bit caught out by this. The Jelly Belly squad at the back trying to promenade and save as much energy as possible, find themselves in a situation where they might be minded to try and work their way up a little bit.
I wouldn't have said so, because it's not actually stringing the bunch out in any way, shape or form. So it's in my eyes bought this straight away, because all they're doing is wasting a lot of energy on the front of the bunch.
Well, Lucas Spengler managed to get into that breakaway group that survived to the closing few hundred meters of yesterday's stage. So clearly the Swiss cycling team have come to race. Danilo Hondo is their manager, of course. Dylan Page has come up with a few good results so far. 3 top 10 finishes, a great 3rd place finish on the 3rd stage. So clearly Dylan Page is in good form, but what can they manage? And one wonders whether they have ambitions for tomorrow's stage. Are they just trying to see, can they sneak a stage one? Well, that's they've gone back in their box a little bit after that.
Yeah, well, if you're doing a move like that, the wind needs to be coming pretty much square onto you, so that you're pushing every single rider in the bunch over towards the center barrier of the road here, and with that you can then snap the elastic. Unless you're stringing the bunch out straight away, you need to have one rider within that team that is effectively initiating the attack, and just call that move off straight away, because like I said, you're just wasting energy, and all that happens is the bunch kind of speeds up a bit, and then as we saw, they're all still very much bunched up behind the Swiss team, and nothing really happened. So yeah, interesting. Good to see that they're taking in the initiative to try something, but at the same time completely the wrong time of the race.
Yeah, just not quite the perfect, but there clearly is a bit of ambition there. It sliced a little bit of time off the gap. Look at that, down to 2 minutes and 41 seconds. Is that inaccurate? It's almost a minute sliced off that advantage. I hardly think that flurry of activity would have made such a difference, but well, suffice it to say, you can see the wind blowing there, and they're picking up those bushes on the left-hand side.
There's one rider that's gone off the front here as well, which, yeah, one of the Vorarlberg riders, but I'm not quite sure what he's going out there for.
Wow. So, single rider from Team Vorarlberg. We wanted to get involved in that little bit of a flurry of excitement a little while ago, but well, it's not going to work out on this occasion. The Willier Trestina squad have managed to retain control of the bunch. They've gone back on the front with four riders. And the Bardiani CSF squad, followed by Delco Marseille Provence. They'll settle back into the usual rhythm. Still a couple of riders from the Swiss national squad just gravitating towards the front of the bunch. Indeed, H&R Block also showing willing. We're down to 40 kilometers to go, about 25 miles in old money for these two riders to try and survive out front. Alexis Cartier here in the black and green colors of H&R Block. And Joris Blocher, 24-year-old Dutchman, riding in his wake, taking a little bit of shelter. And these riders will be starting to feel the pinch. They've been out there for a long time now. 219.6 kilometers, let's call it 220. If you put it all together, and that's second longest stage of the week. The longest stage came on day 2. That was 230 kilometers. At this end of the season, as you say, Magnus, with tired legs, and a lot of riders already thinking about their holidays coming. These long stages can take their toll.
Yeah, they certainly can do, when certainly if you get left out there like these two riders on their own. But Vorarlberg riders clearly wants to carry on with this initiative, and I'm not quite sure why they're pushing so hard, because a 2-minute and 27 gap up to the two breakaway riders is going to take an awful lot to bridge. And I don't think that Willier Trestina are going to let anything go up the road, because the two riders are quite easy to maintain control. Looks
like that might be Mudgeway from the RTS squad, and one of the Swiss riders. They're not going to go back in their box quite so quickly, coming up to a feed zone. So perhaps just trying to pull a fast one a little bit and race through the feed zone, surprise some of the teams that'll be focused more on making sure they get the bottles in. And this is the last opportunity, one of the last opportunities to take on some sustenance ahead of the final push for the line. And of course, a little bit of a drag there as well. The gradient, I think, is playing into these riders' ambitions as well. Just under 2.5 minutes gap, this little bit of racing activity. Well, that's not going to work out for those two riders, nor indeed for the Swiss rider, and they're going to go back into the peloton as the Willier Trestina squad continue to winch the bunch along at that relentless rate. So they're not even really thinking about those particular attacks. They're just continuing to set the tempo, perhaps secure in the knowledge that it's such a fast pace that they're setting that they're almost inevitably going to close down the little ones and twos.
Well, I like I said, if that was me sort of controlling the Willier Trestina team right now, and sort of the road captain, if you will, I would have definitely said to the team, look, let's not let anything go up the road. We're happy with these two guys. They're fairly easy to maintain and manage, and you can almost do that by actually going like for like. So you put two riders from the team to keep the tempo going, and sort of hold that gap to the two breakaway riders, and then as you then want to start bringing those two riders back, you just add another man into the lineup, and straight away the time gap will start to fall. Interesting, Billy.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? That's the three-faced, triple-faced Guan Yin statue. Pretty exciting stuff. Large temple complex here, vegetarian restaurants. Have as many of those as possible. Hotel, extensive, beautifully groomed grounds. Anshan Temple Park is a Buddhist paradise. And Anshan, the South Mountain facing the South China Sea, just in the background, is actually the southernmost mountain in China. It's 108 meters tall, that statue. Spectacular stuff. Heading down towards Sanya, southern boundary of China, and the most popular tourist destination in Hainan province. Oh, remarkable structure. Well inside 40 kilometers to go. The two riders up front now just inside 2.5 minutes to the good. Can they hang on? Find out after these. Well, we've got a little bit more activity. We've got a couple of other counter-attackers that are going to try and see can they race to glory. The two leaders out front, their lead is shrinking and diminishing. The mountains loom tomorrow. At the moment, we're hugging the coastline and keeping it as flat as possible as we race down into Sanya inside the final 35 kilometers of stage 6 of the Tour of Hainan. It's pretty spectacular shots, aren't they? We're worryingly close to the top of that mountain. Looks absolutely fabulous, doesn't it? Racing down towards Sanya. Let's see if we can pick up these two counter-attackers that have just ventured forth in recent times. A little bit of a flurry of activity, all kicked off by the Swiss national team as they sensed a little bit of crosswind, probably more in hope than expectation, really. And now we've got Alexis Cartier trying to drop Eurus Blocker. Looks like it's going to work too.
Yeah, it certainly looks like it's going to work. I'm not quite sure why though, because yesterday Cartier wasn't the strongest rider in the breakaway, and going on your own with 34 kilometers to go, I think that is just a little bit silly. It certainly could have probably used a bit more of this man's energy as well.
Or perhaps there's a little bit of anxiety about that fast shrinking gap because there's some racing going on behind, riders counter-attacking, fresher riders coming out of the bunch, and the gap is closing down at a rate of knots that maybe just overreacting a little bit, or certainly wants to make some sort of reaction. And Cartier is ploughing on. Here are two chasers. Jan Frischke from Team Vorarlberg is second in line here, and Swiss Cycling have inevitably got a rider into this counter-attack. That's Joab Schneiter. Schneiter, indeed, the Swiss cycling rider. The peloton, well, not too far behind, but far enough to at least give these riders the sense that this one is worth racing for. And we see some vehicles further ahead, which suggests that they might be closing this one down at a rate of knots.
Yeah, well, the pace has gone up quite dramatically in the bunch, and certainly those two new breakaway riders are going very strong. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see that. I find it quite interesting tactics, certainly by Cartier, to go out on his own at this point in time and try and solo break this.
Schneider, second in line here. And Jan Frischke of Team Vorarlberg. And how are they managing it behind? The Willier Trestina's squad. Well, here's our lone raider. Alexis Cartier has distanced, and by some considerable margin, his erstwhile breakaway companion. Cartier a little bit anxious about these riders coming up from behind. Schneider, just 19 years of age, the Swiss cycling rider. He's hasn't had much UCI racing so far this year. In fact, all of it's come as a member of the Swiss national squad. So clearly they've unearthed a strong rider who's enjoying his racing 6 days in at 19 years of age. Clearly he's got a future in the sport, no problems recovering each day and doing the miles. It's the second longest stage of the week, and he's racing on to glory. Can he catch up to this man? Well, Alexis Cartier, a little bit older and a little bit further into his career. The Team Vorarlberg rider Jan Frischke continuing to encourage his teenage counter-attacking rider, but they haven't got much of a gap.
Well, they haven't got much of a gap, and they're not pulling out that gap either. So you know, it's difficult obviously when you've got two young riders clearly very eager to show what they can do. But at this point in time, you just need to have a look and look back at the peloton. The peloton is strung out, the William Trestina team on the front, and just ask yourself the question: am I going to be able to ride away from a 5-6 man lineup of pro continental riders that are clearly quite seasoned in their riding, and a lot of them have been going through riding the Giro this year, and they got a certain amount of horsepower. So I would say that this is yeah, they're going to struggle to pull away.
Something of a futile effort, but great to see the ambition. And he's another young rider as well, Frischke. He's still an under 22 years of age indeed, and this is his first year at continental level. He's got some strong results this year actually. 8th in Runtum Kulm, 10th Radam Ring, and 6th in Tour de Europe. Indeed, 8th on a stage as well of the Tour of Austria, and that's a decent collection of strong results for his first year at continental level. Several of those races will have been against riders of more elevated stature, and look at the way that Alexis Cartier has been in the break all day, and he's starting to suffer. Pretty extreme position, isn't it? He's got that stem slammed and angled down, very much in the modern idiom. But Alexis Cartier really suffering to try and hang on for as long as he possibly can. Perhaps a little bit annoyed that they're closing it down at the speed that they're doing.
Yeah, it's interesting watching so many of the riders starting to ride with those negative stems on their bikes. I think there's been a change in how the bike geometry is. The head tube seems to be a little bit taller on quite a lot of frames these days, and it means that a lot of the certainly taller riders end up with a negative stem on the bike, actually the stem pointing down, but it makes the bike handle like a truck. Really not ideal, and this also seemed to be a bit of a fashion that you should sit as low as possible with your handlebars, which I don't really quite understand myself why you need to do that.
For looks, is it? It's
most of it is looks, and I mean, if you're going into the junior ranks, I think the majority of the guys have got 20+ centimeter sort of drop from the saddle to the handlebars because it looks cool. Don't actually ride any faster with it,
and it might not necessarily be good for the ergonomics, good for the physical properties. The taller head tubes, of course, to suit riders that are a little less flexible. There might be one or two of those coming into cycling these days. That's the thinking, isn't it? Certain amount of aesthetics involved. Look at these two riders still hanging on, but surely not for much longer. We're inside 30 kilometers to go on stage 6 of the Tour of Hainan. These two riders just dangling off the front of the bunch, led as it has been for much of the past week by the William Trestina squad. And the counter-attacks are coming thick and fast. It was the Swiss national team that kicked off all of this activity, and everyone wants to get involved. And after yesterday's tough stage, you might be a little bit surprised, but this, I think, is the last chance until Sunday for a lot of these riders to really show what they're capable of, because the mountains loom tomorrow. Here's our lone leader. He's been out front since kilometre 0. Alexis Cartier, the 27-year-old Frenchman, is really suffering out there to try and hang on, clear his erstwhile breakaway companions. Well, initially it was Kononenko from the kilometre 0. He hoovered up some bonus seconds along the way at the 3 intermediate sprints, and Kononenko then went back into the bunch, leaving Joris Blucher, who's just been picked up here by the two chasers from the bunch. So Blucher might live to last a little bit longer. And that rider coming up from behind, is it a rider from the H&R Block squad? Difficult to tell with the sun glaring, but I suspect it could well be that squad, or perhaps one of the other Asian continental teams that is trying to strike out for glory inside 30k to go. Meanwhile, William Trestina, I don't think they're too concerned at the moment.
No, they certainly don't look too concerned. They're keeping a good pace at the front of the bunch here, and just working away. They know exactly what they're doing and how they want to do it. So I don't think they're too worried, to be honest. There's also a lot of teams back there that I think they are certainly counting on to get a bit of help from should they need it. And with Bardiani, CSF, they're clearly quite keen on tomorrow's stage, the Queen stage with the mountains there. Looking at their lineup, they're here for one reason only, and that's take away the overall. So I think they're not going to want to let any riders whatsoever get too big a gap today, because although it's a Queen stage tomorrow, it's not exactly an Alpine stage. It's a Michelin Scott rider, I think.
Well, that indeed looks like it's Fuan Shui of the Michelin Scott team, as indeed you said, who's just going to make the junction and make it 4 riders chasing one lone leader, and these 4 with a narrow advantage of just a few seconds over the Willier-led peloton. We can see the vehicles up ahead, so it's not much of a distance, can't be much more than 25-30 seconds to your leader up front. So the gap between the front and the peloton down to just a handful of seconds at this moment. Fuyan Shui of the Michelin Scott squad joins on the back. Blucher's not going to be of much assistance, but 3 riders now certainly will be capable of chasing hard, and it's brave resistance, isn't it, by Alexis Cartier, because he's really suffering. His face tells you everything you need to know. He's getting it all out, and he's not going to leave anything on the road. He's going to make sure that he's at least given himself the best chance, and he's going to stay and keep that jersey on television for as long as he possibly can through to the conclusion of today's stage, if possible. And that looks increasingly a forlorn hope. A little bit of information, a little bit of encouragement. Cartier not entirely alone in his suffering. As much support as possible.
It's amazing how nice it is when you get that team car coming up and sitting next to you for a bit and having a bit of a chat and giving you information and encouragement. You kind of feel that you're out there with someone, even though you're actually in a lone break. And I certainly quite like to have that team car sitting behind me. It's also good in terms of picking up bottles and food and stuff like that. You never really carried more than 1 bottle when you're doing a long lone breakaway, because as soon as you've drunk 1 bottle, you just ask the car to come up with a new one for you.
Yeah, especially if the wind happens to be coming from one side or the other. It's
of course you would position yourself in that position, because the mechanic would be sitting on the other side of the car. So
he'd be the ideal man.
You have a chat with the mechanic then instead.
Indeed. So here's our counter-attackers. Looks like all 4 in the line, and continuing to put his shoulder to the wheel, Joab Schneider, a 19-year-old with the Swiss cycling team. And they're just hanging on by the narrowest of margin. No one looking around. They're all going to try and stay out there for as long as they can, but surely it's beyond them to manage it. But well, that is part of the beauty of cycling, isn't it? Sometimes these ultimately futile efforts, there's a real beauty in that effort, isn't it? There's a glory in it.
Yeah, to an extent there is.
Tactically naive,
tactically
but still
very
beautiful.
naive, but you gotta. I mean, you got to look at it from a different view, I think, in terms of the aggression that these guys are showing, and the willingness to try and create something is obviously very good to see. So
within 13 seconds for the chasers of making the junction with Alexis Cartier. I find it hard to believe that, well no, actually, that they're sitting 59 seconds down on Alexis Cartier. Is it as much as that? That's the impressive work by Cartier to hang on as well as he's managing at this point.
Yeah, and but there's only 13 seconds between the chasers and the peloton, so you know they're not exactly pulling out a big gap, and I think Cartier is gonna struggle. But looking at how quickly the time gaps are tumbling here now, we could create a bit of a problem for Willier Triestina if they have to keep the pace up, because they don't want to let those 4 riders go up the road too much. They want to try and maintain that. As I think it's one of the riders.
More counter-attacks.
No, coming back. Blocker has got dropped off the front group here.
Yeah, Joris Blocker. He resisted for as long as he possibly could, but out there all day, coming up on 200 kilometers of racing in the breakaway today for Joris Blocker. So he's cried enough, and it'll be interesting to see whether he even makes it in with the peloton. The peloton continue to be led by the Willier Triestina squad. So it's just over a minute advantage for our lone raider up front. Few counter-attackers, but William Trestina keeping them in close attendance. Wide open highways leading down to Sanya, the most popular tourist destination in Hainan, on the 6th stage of the Tour of Hainan, with the William Trestina squad keeping those counter-attackers. 3 riders clear, and in front of them by just over a minute we have the lone leader from the early breakaway, Alexis Cartier, alone in his pain and his suffering and brave work that he's doing. The Canadian rider trying to resist for as long as he possibly can, but it's a long way to the finish. And well, 22 kilometers. He's just, as I say, coming up on 200 kilometers of bike riding in the breakaway today. He's got, well, fantastic endurance, great engine, but will he have enough to hold on the peloton behind? Stage 6 of the Tour of Hainan is boiling up to be another sprint finish, another opportunity perhaps for Jakub Mareczko. Can he go for 5 in the row? It's looking good at the moment for at least his opportunity to be there. 50 seconds between the front and the peloton, and 16-second advantage for these 3 riders. They've managed to add 3 seconds to their lead in the last couple of kilometers. Suffice it to say, it's a little bit too little, a little bit too late for but they'll push on for as long as possible. Perhaps in a way it's of value to the William Trestina squad. There's a little bit of diversion from their efforts, but they'll want to keep the tempo high to prevent any more counterattack.
Well, yeah, you don't want any more counterattacks, but with only 50 seconds up to the lone leader and 16 seconds up to those guys, we're soon getting to the point where it could actually become a problem. We got more attacks and so on and so on. Swiss team here now putting another man into the break, and straight away Bardiani realised that we've got to start looking around here now and pay attention, because with these small time gaps up towards the current breaks, it's very much bridgeable. 16 seconds is one massive turn, and you're there.
Well, that's interesting that Bardiani CSF covered that one. Bardiani have come here for the overall. They've got Enrico Barbin, stage winner in the Tour of Langkawi. Perhaps Simone Sterbini after his great second place finish on a mountain stage of the Tour of Utah. They're 2 riders to watch out for tomorrow, and they're just perhaps a little bit frustrated by this situation. But the way that the Swiss propelled their second rider up the road to try and get into this move, interesting tactically.
Well, smart tactically, I'd say. The biggest, the most difficult part of a break or creating a breakaway is usually the moment you attack and you go so deep to, it's almost a full sprint to create the gap and to open up a gap where the riders behind you are having to take the same amount of wind as you're taking, and then settling down and pressing on for the next 2 minutes or so. Once you've kind of established a bit of a gap and you can settle into some sort of a work rate, then it tends to be easier. But William Trestina not going to want to let any Bardiani rider go up the road, and with that I think they'll close this down quite easily.
Just stepped it up ever so slightly, and frustrating really for that Swiss rider. 18 seconds of a gap to close, and didn't even get to barely off the front of the peloton for just a few moments. Still the metronomic performance by the William Trestina squad. They've done manful work. Alex Turin on the front of the peloton for much of the afternoon, Luca Raggio as well, and as has been the case for the past few days, Ilya Koshevoy never far from the front. Those 3 riders doing much of the legwork to make sure that this riders in the breakaway group is kept at close attention. 35 seconds now to the front of this race. It's not going to be too long before Cartier is mopped up by these 3 riders, as Schneider of the Swiss squad continues to press on. Jan Frischke of Team Vorarlberg now takes up position on the front, and monitoring affairs at the back for the moment is Fuen Shui of the Mitchelton squad.
I find it quite interesting that the Swiss were trying to send another rider up the road as well when they already got one man in the break. You would have thought that they would be more keen on trying to keep the pace as low as possible in the bunch. but like you said, the Willia Trestina guys, they're doing a great job, and it is Luka Raggio and Ilya Korshevoy who've done the majority of the big miles on the front, and then with about 15-20 kilometers to go, they seem to sort of have done their bit. And if you're looking at the times that they've lost, Raggio has lost for 12.5, just over 12.5 minutes, and Korshevoy is sitting at 11 minutes, so they've done their work and then basically dropped back and taking a very benign, gentle ride in towards the finish.
And that's important. That's a professional thing to do, isn't it? I mean, it sounds counterintuitive, but to actually actively go out of your way to get dropped, it sounds unusual, but it's the right thing to do.
It's definitely the right thing to do. You've got to have riders who do the hard yards and the big work on the front, and there's only so long that you can do that for. And when the pace needs to be stepped up, they're usually part of that first initial wind up of speed, and try and hang in there for as long as possible, but inevitably they haven't got the legs to keep that kind of pace going for any longer period of time. And you tend to see those riders that have sat there and done the big mileage drop off quite quickly.
And to be able to do it again tomorrow, it's useful to have those last sort of 20 or 30 kilometers to just spin the legs out a bit.
Yeah, you spin the legs out, you kind of cool down a bit on the way into the finish line. And it's if you're looking at it from other sports point of views, it's the same as if you're taking a football team. You can't have a whole team full of strikers. You need defenders and so on, and midfielders in the team to be able to create and set up a good game. And it's the same within cycling. You need these guys to do their part of the job within the team as well.
Well, now the junction is made. 1 becomes 4. As Frischke leads that trio of riders up to Cartier. Cartier is joined. Has he got the energy to hang on? He certainly does. Too much effort from Fuan Shui. It's been the Team Vorarlberg rider Frischke and the Swiss national rider Schneider that have done the majority of the legwork in making that junction. So we have 4 riders at the front, still 17 kilometers remaining, but the gap is just a handful of seconds to that peloton, which is stretched thin under the combined forces of the Willia Trestina squad. In their wake, the Bardiani CSF team looking towards the overall tomorrow. Have had some decent sprint performances so far this week by Paolo Simeon. 4th and a 5th place finish yesterday indeed for Simeon, so he's the man to watch out for, wearing dossard number 4, and he's just sitting second last of the Bardiani CSF riders, the second team in line. Working the rotation here, still just 2 riders making the effort. I think Cartier is almost a spent force, and he certainly won't want to make any effort here. I think it's going to be left up to Frischke and Schneider to do the donkey work. For Shui, well, interesting play really. Robert Stannard has been safely in the bunch and managed to get up into a nice top 20 finish on at least one of the days for Mitchelton Scott. They haven't really come here with a sprint team, so they'll be looking towards Jai Hindley, maybe Jenner, Stannard, as I say. Shui is well placed overall, still in that main bunch time, you might say, of just 47 seconds in arrears, and now starting to ride through, making the contribution where it's possible, but maintaining a gap of just 15 seconds.
Oh, 15 seconds is a tall order with 15 kilometers to go to hold on to, and certainly looking at the how the peloton is looking, the speed is high.
Just over 15 kilometers remaining. Willia Trestina just ratchet on the pace ever so slightly. Every passing kilometer, it just feels like it's getting faster and faster. further and further that they go, and the endurance and the speed being tested of the riders in there. Look at the way it's stretched back all the way through the top 20 or more riders, 25 riders. They are absolutely on the rivet now and flying. And Jakub Mareczko seems to be winning for fun, as we've said over the last few days. He said he was really, really tired after yesterday's stage. All the riders, 167, not the longest stage of the week, but it was just raced relentlessly, and that will be having its effect into today as well. 6 days of racing, so it's starting to, there'll be a few riders in there will be starting to feel the pinch.
Well, I think pretty much all of the guys will feel it in their legs. It just, the guys are used to doing the grand tours here. They probably they get used to having that waking up and feeling that same feeling and getting back on the bike, and they know within the first hour or so the legs tend to open up, and you know, the bodies have been used to doing that for a number of years. But looking at the speed in this bunch here as well, it's not often that you see a bunch lined out the way it is right now. And I gotta say that when you're sitting on the front as a team and you're the man setting the pace, and you look back and see that line out, it tends to put a big smile on your face.
Well, it looks like Cartier has not got a smile on his face now. Or is it Shui? It could be Shui actually, from the Mitchelton Scott squad. He was struggling a little bit to make contributions, so it looks like they've dispensed with the services of one of those 4 riders up front. Still hanging on, and if anything, they've extended by a second or two in the last kilometre, but well, should be well within the compass of this bunch to close down that 18-second advantage into the final stages. That's 1 rider mopped up, 3 to go for them, with just under 15 kilometres remaining. Indeed, it is Shui of Mitchelton Scott who's back in the bunch. Great work by Cartier after all his efforts today to hang on for as long as he possibly can, as Frischke on the front here for Team Vorarlberg. And slowly and very shortly to be replaced by Joab Schneider of Swiss Cycling. Those riders really suffering, but it's a brave effort. And how many of these riders will feature in tomorrow's Queen's stage? It's got 2 Category 1 ascents. It's got a 2nd category ascent, couple of 3rd category climbs, just up and down all day. And that last Category 1 ascent comes relatively close to the line, and it's going to play a big role in deciding the overall honours of the Tour of Hainan for 2017. Lots of the teams trying to protect riders through into that into tomorrow's stage where they possibly can. We watch out for Team Ukio's Benjamin Prades, well placed in the mountains classification. Tour of Taiwan winner for 2017. Oscar Pujol, we mentioned him a little bit earlier. He's Tour of Japan winner this year as well. Both those Spanish riders climb well, know how to put together a complete week of tough racing. Sergei Tvetsov of the Jelly Belly powered by Max's team is a rider tipped by many to perform well in the mountains tomorrow, and I think he'll certainly be one to watch out for. In the attack team Gusto squad have Benjamin Hill. He won the Tour de Tochigi, short 2.2, relatively minor UCI event, but clearly got strong legs and going well on the Asian scene at the moment. This is a 2-point HC or category event. This is as high a value stage race as you will have in Asia. Apart, of course, from that World Tour event that we had in China the other week. It's a brand new event, of course. The Tour of Hainan, altogether greater and much better established. This is the 12th edition. And almost 5 hours of tough racing, and still it is just the one team on the front. Willier Trestina, you mentioned the fact that a number of riders in here have the Grand Tour experience, among them several riders from Willier Trestina, and those legs are being called into battle. 19 seconds the lead, and they're extending it ever so slightly. No sign of anyone else just trying to clip across the gap. The wind is blowing, so it's not that easy a day for the riders through the tunnel. Well, tomorrow they're going up over the hills rather than racing underneath them. It's going to emerge on the other side. Well, the city of Sanya is a popular tourism destination.
And it's an interesting finish today as well. Slightly different to what we've had in the previous couple of stages, where there's been a big drag strip in for the last 4 or 5 kilometers into the finish line. When I say a bit different, I mean we have a corner with about 500-600 meters to the line today, but it's a good 4 kilometers or so dead straight into that final corner. So I think positioning into that final turn is going to be quite vital, and we saw on stage 1 that Willia Trestina got that wrong, and it was certainly Bardiani who seemed to have the best setup going into that final corner. And these guys in blue here, Delco Marseille, have done a great job in keeping their team together and coming into the finish in a good way, but just seem to sort of lack that, should we call it, cohesion of deciding which man we're doing the sprint for. But Mr. Lars there, Martin Lars, has certainly shown that he's the fastest man in the team right at this given moment. And yesterday was the first time I think we saw that they really looked after him and only him, and not trying to sort of place as many riders as they could in the top 10.
Yeah, 3 second-place finishes out of the last 4 stages for Martin. Last sense of mounting frustration, perhaps. They've got to try something different, and that turn, that left turn right turn inside the last kilometre is really going to dominate the tactics of the teams, isn't it? The focus is entirely going to be on that right turn.
Is it a left turn?
Sorry, left turn.
Yeah, left turn.
Just the other.
I was thinking, am I looking at this this map the wrong way around?
It's definitely left.
Definitely left. Yeah. They need to focus on that final turn and going through that corner with maybe one rider in front of Lars and then opening up the sprint. It can be a bit difficult, and certainly when you've had a completely different type of sprint for the last number of days, resetting your mind and changing the approach to it can be difficult, and certainly there's enough opportunity to get that one wrong.
Well, Cartier's recovered a little bit in the wheels and is now making a contribution. It's great. It's brave effort, isn't it? He's not found wanting. He is certainly willing to lay it all out on the road to try and stay up the road for as long as possible. We're inside 10 kilometers remaining. The best Asian rider is Liu Jianpeng from the Hengchang squad. He's down towards the back of the bunch. Not likely to be involved in the final shake-up. If you want to be racing for glory today, the ideal position is quite a bit closer to the front, and it's a long way to the front because there aren't too many, there isn't too much bunching up there, is there? The teams in the usual order. It's the Pro Continental outfits dominating the front of the bunch, with the Willia Trestina squad from Italy with their Italian sprinter Jacob Marechko. Next up is the Bardiani CSF squad. They'll look towards Paolo Simeon as their best sprinting option for today in the green, the lime green jerseys. And then the blue of the French Pro Continental team, Delco Marseille Provence, with the green points jersey on the shoulders of the man sitting second in that competition, Martin Lass. Looking after it for Jacob Marechko, down to 13 seconds. The gradient grips ever so slightly, and that I think perhaps helps the Willia Trestina squad just to shave a few seconds off the advantage of those riders. They're not going to leave it as close as they did yesterday, because that was nip and tuck, wasn't it? Down to the last 300 meters.
That was a bit too close for comfort, but nevertheless 13 seconds. It's basically the final couple of 100 meters of lead out can shave 13 seconds off. And I think we saw on the pictures yesterday the speed that the peloton was coming at the breakaway at is so dramatically different to what the break is capable of doing, even though that the break had already opened up their sprint and started sprinting full gas, and the lead out was just coming past them like they were standing still. So 13 seconds, I wouldn't worry too much about that. It's just a question of keep plugging away at it. These guys in the front, they're gonna fatigue a bit, and as I say that, they lost another 3 seconds, so it's down to 10-second gap here now with exactly 8 kilometers to go.
Yeah, it was a gap of over 20 seconds, wasn't it, going into the final kilometre for those 3 riders up front in yesterday's stage. So that just shows you how quickly a fast charging bunch, the old 1 minute per 10-kilometre rule, it's just an average really, and it tends to, the rate of capture escalates to dramatic fashion when it comes down into that closing.
That 1 minute per 10k is usually something that you work on for the earlier sort of part of the stage when you're starting to bring back a group. It's something that you sort of tend to set yourself up with and engage your catch rate with. And then you kind of know that, okay, if we really need to, and if we get this wrong, or the breakaway is that much stronger than we expect them to be, then we can turn the volume up to 11 basically, and bring a lot more back in the final 10k should we need to.
Frischke, the 22-year-old from Switzerland. So 2 Swiss riders here and a Canadian rider. The Swiss riders will know each other well, of course, and that might have encouraged each other. Maybe they might have even had a little bit of a chat about it. So it's Schneider, the 19-year-old, now rides through to the front. The pain etched on his face. This is really, really hurting. It's brave effort. They're putting their name out there in lights and trying to give themselves a little bit of a push, career-wise, and doing a pretty good job about it. Peloton, though, watching with admiration, but with no great concern at the moment.
No, I don't think there's any concern really. I think the Vinicius squad has got this under control, and as we can see, there's a lineup of green jerseys just behind, and behind them you got a lineup of blue jerseys. So there are enough teams here ready to step in and start helping out. And in the not too distant future, I think we'll see 1 or 2 of the teams starting to think about maybe taking up the control of the peloton. If I was Delco Marseille or CSF, Bombardier and CSF, I would probably try and hold on and wait to that final 2 kilometers, and at that point then go full tilt, because like I said, you don't want to have riders challenging you for position going into that final corner. And if you can make it fast enough in the final kilometer leading into that turn, then you're putting your sprinter in a much better position, not being challenged too much for his sort of plays on the back of your team.
Well, it's worth pointing out, I suppose, that the Wilier Triestina rider Jakub Mareczko is going for records. He's taken 4 wins. That's by no means a record. Indeed, last year in this event there were 5 victories for Max Walscheid, and that indeed is not even a record in this event, because in the past we've seen other riders manage to take 6 victories. Boris Szpilewski took 6 victories back in 2008. Theo Boss took 6 victories in 2013. So that's still a target for Jakub Mareczko. Indeed, if he was to manage that, he would take that other record of the most successful sprint, the most successful pro cyclist of the year in terms of victories. So they've got those wins that they really, really want, and for that means that the Wilier Triestina squad are going to take it up on the front, and they're not going to, tactical fighting. So 3 riders up front, down to the final 8 seconds of their lead. The bunch starts to become crystallized in our vision behind. That tells you that they're not too far from making the catch. 4 kilometers remaining, and the bunch is starting to spread a little bit wider as riders are willing to waste a little bit of energy. Not wasting it, they're going to use it up to make sure that they can make it through to the front and put their sprinters into good position. Running the rule over them, it's been all about Mareczko so far this week. We've mentioned Martin Lass and his string of second place finishes for the Delco Marseille Provence squad. Paolo Simeon has been sprinting well in the last couple of days. Watch out for Andrej Kulik, great 3rd place finish for the Coll cycling team. He's got 3 top 10 finishes this week, and he seems to be getting faster and faster, or at least the distances each day and the is not affecting him. Aberysturi as well, of course. He's been a little bit up and down, but he has got a first and second place finishes from the 5 stages so far for Team Ukea.
And I think this particular sprint suits Aberysturi a bit better than the previous couple of sprints now. So I'd say keep a bit of an eye out for him.
Watch out for Team Ukea and the colours.
3 kilometers to go, and now the teams are starting to move up and challenge for position. We're gonna see one big drag race going into that final turn today, and I think it's gonna be a fluorescent yellow and black. We're gonna have a green train and the blue train. They're gonna be the ones really challenging for position into that final corner.
Team Novo Nordisk on the left-hand side in the white colours. Mehdi Banamouda was 8th yesterday. Great finish for that squad. So they're looking for a similar performance. H&R Block Pro Cycling Team have been up the front throughout in the afternoon, and they also have Marc-Antoine Nadon and Jure Rupnik sprinting well. Good top 10 finish for him yesterday. Nadon perhaps the rider that they'll look towards. Still, the entire Willia Trestina squad at the front. So they're still very much in a very, very strong commanding position. Now we've got Delco Marseille Provence moving up on the right hand side, the blue jerseys. Watch out for the green at the back of the points leader, and that's their Delco Marseille Provence sprinter Martin Lass of Estonia, who's sitting just to the right and just the left as we look on the picture of the overall race leader, Jakub Mareczko, in the yellow jersey of the overall race leader. 2,000 meters of racing remaining. Delco Marseille Provence, Dibal, he's at the back, no longer playing a role in this stage. He's done his work to this point. Now it's left up to the lead-out man, and the Delco Marseille Provence squad, just as you said, Magnus, want to try and take on the Willia Trestina team.
Yeah, they certainly do, but I think we're going to find that the Bardiani riders are positioned really well there as well, just holding fire, waiting a bit longer before they start opening up their sprint as well. We got Coles there as well on the left-hand side in the darker blue colours with a green strip on them, but so far Willia Trestina looking very composed, keeping themselves together, and we got Jupa sitting there with Mareczko on the wheel.
Mareczko in the wheel of his faithful lieutenant, Jugert Jupa, and waiting to light the blue touch paper. We saw Martin Lass in the wind just momentarily, but it's the Delco Marseille Provence squad that are going to get to lead this one out. They're certainly going to lead the charge down into the final bend, it would appear, because they spread wide across the road, head into this left-hander and pick things up inside the final 600 meters. It's still Delco Marseille Provence on the front here. Lass sitting in second place, Mareczko fourth in line. The crowd cheer and wait to see the hum of the tires as now we get the launch. Jugert Jupa is ready to launch Mareczko, and Lass is going to have to come off the wheel of the man who's won all those stages so far this week. The other teams mass as they try to get involved in this one, as Swiss Cycling have Dylan Page perhaps ready to go. Here goes Mareczko to the line, trying to make it 5 in a row. That distinctive sprinting style, can anyone get around him? Can they even get on his wheel? It's got to be Mareczko. It's all too easy. It's 5 in a row for Jakub Mareczko. He takes victory on stage 6 of Tour of Hainan, once more ahead of Martin Lass of the Delco Marseille Provence squad. All the rest are also rounds, because Jakub Mareczko is the dominant force in Asian racing at the moment. He takes victory once more on Tour of Hainan, 5 in a row. Absolutely perfect performance once more by the Willia Trestina squad. They can only be congratulated, and indeed he will be, because he has now made it 13 for the season, and well, he's absolutely thrilled with that performance. Thumbs up for 5 victories. And Mareczko will now wait and try and pick up his team, and they will have a collective celebration. Something that's all too familiar, and they're certainly starting to get used to it, aren't they?
I certainly think they are getting used to it, but
that's a picture of frustration, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is a picture of frustration. I've got to say, though, they did a good job there, Delco Marseille, in delivering Lars. Maybe went a fraction too early or ran out of men a bit too early. But nevertheless, they challenged and they did a good job. But Jupa, as a lead-up man, has certainly got the power to really deliver Marechko in a superb speed. And I mean,
well, he's able to smile because he knows he's been beaten by the better man. In the sprint, he actually got to launch first. Marechko came around him. He was able to get in the wheel and take some of, but it was just Marechko taking him to second place in a way, wasn't it?
Yeah, it certainly was. I think, like I said, the Delco Marseille team just ran out of manpower a fraction too early, and with that, I think Lars had to find another wheel, stepped into the right wheel, got onto the wheel of Marechko. But as soon as Marechko lights up, you know, he's got just a lot more speed and obviously a lot of confidence coming in with 5 wins now.
Simeon went close to second place, so we wait for the overall official results. Aberasturi well placed as well. Well, Marechko, arms in the air, plenty of time to compose his victory celebration. It's becoming a familiar one. But now he's got another 10 seconds bonus. What can he climb? He's not a big man, but he's certainly a stocky rider in the mold of a sprinter, isn't it? So we don't have huge expectations of him being able to get over those 2 first category ascents tomorrow. Certainly not the sort of climbs that he would have challenged himself on in the past to try and make it across with the lead group, but perhaps looking at the winners of this race in previous years, Sasha Modolo, Moreno Hofland, et al., he might actually be minded to just see can he resist for a little while tomorrow. He's certainly given himself plenty of bonus seconds to stay involved in the hunt if he's got his climbing legs on tomorrow. Marechko, though, well, he's here for the sprints in the main. He's got another great opportunity on Sunday, perhaps as well the penultimate stage on Saturday might be another opportunity as well. It's a hard day out with plenty of climbing, not quite as difficult as the climbing that we've got tomorrow. But for now, well, he won't be thinking about tomorrow. He's just going to celebrate today for what it is right now. A perfect performance by the Wilier Tristina squad once more.
I think if we look back a bit through the season in terms of Marechko's climbing ability, let's take what we should probably call the Sprinters Classic, Milan-San Remo. He managed to get in 163rd in that one. Okay. So I don't think that his climbing ability is going to stack up tomorrow when the climbers are lighting it up on that final first category climb. I think he may get over the first couple of climbs, but after that I have a feeling that is going to be a bit too much.
Well, there we have it. It was second place finish for Martin Lass. Once more, nothing he could do about Jakob Marechko takes stage 6 of the Tour of Hainan. It was Marco Marinesi got up for third for the Bardiani squad ahead of Aberasturi, Dylan Page, Stefan Bakker, Marco Zanotti sprinting well once more. Kulik back in 8th, and Martin de Jonge just managing to edge into the top 10. And the Monkey Town Continental squad. Marechko sits astride the results.